community research, town and city research on towns and cities, and on stratification, class, cleavage, agreements and disagreements about stratification images, the attitude towards women's position in society, membership in voluntary associations in these towns and in the cities. Okay, so last week I started with three towns and cities, two of them from Üvecel Kreis research, Ereğli and İzmir. One of them, actually two of them again, from Bahattin Akşit's research, Bahattin Akşit and his friends' research on Kırıkkale and Keskin. And as I told you, my MA thesis was written on that. And also a member of the team of the researchers was Filiz Kardam. Filiz Kardam also have written her thesis on Kırıkkale-Keskin data, but it is not available in the internet, and I share, the theses which are available in the internet so that you can reach them. So today I will go into my PhD research, the town, the city, middle-sized city that I did research during 1973 and 74 and 75. Actually, data is collected in 1974 as a whole, and 75 as an administration of a questionnaire and depth interviews and visits, participant observation in a middle-sized city which is from central Anatolia, Çorum. It is Çorum. But in my thesis, I didn't name it. I renamed it as Ortakent. So throughout the thesis, it was named as Ortakent, and the title of the PhD thesis, is Social Change and Cleavage in a Middle-Sized Turkish City. So I am focusing on both social change, social stratification, and cleavage, because now this research, as I said, is done during early 1970s. Sorry. And in 1971, there was a second coup d'etat, military intervention, because of the cleavages and conflicts between different ideological groups, political parties, unions, different unions, associations, civil society associations. So, as a sociologist, I was interested in studying how these changes and cleavages spread into the rest of Turkey from the center being Ankara, Istanbul, Izmir, three metropolitan cities. These were urbanized, industrialized, relatively industrialized. But these cleavages were taking place in small towns, for example, in Çorum or in southeastern Anatolia, in central Anatolia, in western Anatolia, different parts of Turkey. And I wanted to study these conflicts, these cleavages in a central Anatolian city. It was, at 50,000, between 50,000 and 99,000 category. Now, of course, no research is alone. My research at that time in 1974, 73, 74, 75 is a continuation of research that I discussed already. Vivek Kray's Ereğli research, Izmir research, and mine and my friends' research in Kırıkkale Keskin. But in addition to these, my professors in Middle East Technical University Sociology Department, who were from University of Chicago, from United States, were also carrying out town studies at that time, during late 60s and early 70s. One of them was Michael Meeker, whom I used his book throughout the first semester. He was an anthropologist studying a northern Anatolian, a Black Sea town of Trabzon, a district of Trabzon, and how he combined his anthropological study with his historical sociology, the empire. The name of the book, as you remember, was The Nation of the Empire. How actually the family agas in the town of were continuations of, again, similar agas or landlords during 18th, 19th centuries. How it was a continuation of 18th, 19th century. How, as an anthropologist, during his first study, where he stayed a year or so, but the residents of and Trabzon didn't remember, or according to Meeker, they repressed the continuity from Ottoman imperial times to the Republican times, because Republican approach was that, Republican Turkey and Ottoman Turkey, there is a shift, there is a break, rather than a continuity. But as a historical sociologist and anthropologist, he found out the continuity. Anyway, that was one. Another, at that time, in 1968, 69, Meeker was a PhD student in University of Chicago, and I had a class from him, and a class on, again, urbanization or social change, something like that. And in that class, he talked about Clifford Geertz's study of two towns in Java, Indonesia. You see, Vivek Kray is studying a town in Black Sea coast, and Michael Meeker himself is studying a town in the eastern side of the Black Sea, whereas Ereğli is on the western Black Sea. And then there was Peter Benedict, again a PhD student from University of Chicago, who was studying a town in southern Turkey, Ula, the town of Ula. Now, while both towns in the Black Sea were, developing towns, vibrant, Ula, according to Peter Benedict, was a town which was declining. Earlier, Ula was a one of the central towns of the province, Muğla province. But during 60s, it started to decline. So Peter Benedict was trying to understand what are the dynamics of change. So that one, and then Lloyd Fallers, who also taught a course in Middle East University, University of Middle East, in the Department of Sociology on social change. I took a course from Lloyd Fallers on social change, and in the meantime, he was also studying the town of Edremit in Western Turkey, in the Aegean, Sea. So I decided to study a central Anatolian city, because all others were coastal towns where there was a lot of change, one way or another, development or decline. But still, it is a change, Ula, for example. So I wanted to see whether in a central Anatolian town there was change, and what was the direction of that change. Okay, so my research in 1973, 74, 75 was on this middle-sized city in the middle of central Anatolia, in the category of 50,000, 99,000 population of the province, Now, of course, in 1940s and 50s, it was 20,000 or 10,000. So it developed, it went through 20,000, 30,000, 40,000, 50,000 and above, and presently, it is over 100,000. Anyway, at that time, it was in the 50,000, 99,000 category. So what did I do? I went there frequently. I visited the town, Çorum. I talked with people, in-depth interviews, observations, as I said, and then I selected a sample from the list of election lists. Actually, at that time, there was in 1973 there was an election in Çorum. I think it was a partial election, and Çorum was included. So there was new lists of family heads or voters, voters in the elections. So I have chosen from every neighborhoods were the units, and within the neighborhood, proportional to population. So I have chosen my sample and administered my questionnaire, and then I analyzed it by using SPSS. SPSS. I think this year you had a survey and you analyzed your data. You are analyzing maybe by using SPSS. Anyway, at that time, using SPSS was not as easy as now. I coded my material into cards, and then with a box, I was going to the computer center in the middle of Middle East Technical University, giving my program. I was writing a program, and then next day I was going and getting the results. It was difficult, but I did that, and then I went to Chicago, University of Chicago, where I had all my courses completed to write and defend my thesis. I defended it, and I had my PhD. Now, let me share with you the table of contents of the thesis, or my thesis now. Okay, let me do it like this. Now share my screen. Share my screen, and here and which one is mine? This is the one. Let me put this one. Okay. Here you see, I think, okay, social change and cleavage in a middle-sized Turkish city. A dissertation submitted to the Division of Social Sciences in candidacy for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy, the Department of Sociology in 1975. Okay, there is a preface here. Let me go to table of contents. As you see, in any research, you have to have a problem. My problem, I already stated, was why there are cleavages and conflicts in middle-sized cities. I knew that there were already cleavages and conflicts in metropolitan cities. You know, it is normal part of a modern industrial urban society, you know, having class structure and cleavages, etc. In, for example, in Istanbul in 1970, there was a strike of workers. A workers' union organized a march within the streets of the city, you know. So after that, in 1971, there was a coup d'etat, but before coup d'etat and after, the conflicts and cleavages continues in the in central Anatolia and rest of the country, not only in metropolitan cities like Ankara, Istanbul, and Izmir. So that was my problem. So I reviewed previous research, and I developed a theoretical framework and hypotheses, and then I have chosen my sample, developed a questionnaire, and operationally defined my variables. I will not go, you know, into details of this. And then I went into the historical development of the city, Çorum, Ortakent. So Ortakent in history. Now, one of the main arguments, theoretical arguments, is that the changes in this middle-sized city was in terms of its relationship with the national market and national centers, political center, urban centers, metropolitan centers like Ankara, Istanbul, Izmir, and to what extent the cities and the villages, you know, the settlements in Turkey are integrated into the state, the bureaucracy, you know, extending from Ankara to the rest of the country, and to the market forces, market, financial and other type of forces, you know, the banks having its centers in Ankara or Istanbul and throughout the cities in Turkey, you know, in the rest of Turkey, or, you know, all other kinds of, or newspapers published, most of them in Istanbul, and being read in all of the towns and even in the villages, or schools everywhere, schools, for example, but the center of the schools. It is centrally administered. So integration into the political and economic and cultural, political, economic, and cultural national centers, you know, and how, as a result of that, or as an illustration of that, what kind of occupations, etc., and in relationship to the metropolitan centers and other cities with different sizes, where does Orta Kent stay? And then this is chapter 3. Chapter 4, I problematize certification. You know, certification is usually thought of in a stratigraphic image. You know, in Europe, aristocracy is one strata, bourgeoisie the second strata, petit bourgeoisie the third strata, and proletariat or working class fourth strata. You know, stratas. Now, my advisor, my professor Lloyd Fowlers, problematized this issue. You know, whether there are a stratigraphic image in non-Western countries. Now, you know, he has, I quoted him where he says that, you know, he is studying stratification in Africa, in African countries, and, you know, and he started studying it in Edremit in Turkey, but he didn't see, you know, the stratigraphic image is peculiar to Western history, Western socioeconomic, political, cultural history. What is more general is inequality. Instead of studying certification, it is better to study inequality, eşitsizlik, you know. Okay, so I was also aware of this criticism and trying to find out, you know, what kind of classes or strata exist in this town, and what kind of cleavages there are. So, and what are the cleavage images of household heads whom I administered into questionnaires, and what are the subjective identification with which strata or with which class, social structural cleavages, and modernity of attitude towards women. You know, this was one of my dependent variables, where my independent variables are education, age, class, exposure to mass media, income, and rent, the rent of the house, or if they are not living in a rented house, what will be the rent of their own house? We will see these. And then my other dependent variable was affiliation with voluntary associations. Affiliation with voluntary associations. So 3 dependent variables. One was modernity of attitude towards women. 2, the image distribution of stratification images of the family heads. And 3, their affiliation with or membership with voluntary associations. Okay, and then I analyzed them, as I said, using SPSS and non-quantitative data by codes, etc. And then my chapter 5 is I tried to generalize my findings through neighborhood level ecological correlational analysis and province level, provinces in Turkey level analysis. And then the last chapter, sixth chapter, is discussion of findings and lines of future research. Okay, now let me very quickly go to, I cannot go through all parts and sections of my thesis, but I will jump. I will go to page 73, where there is a table about occupational structure. Okay, now table 2. Sectoral distribution of economically active population in Orta Kent in 1955, 65, and 70. These are census, population censuses were taken every 5 years up to recently, I think 2000, up to 2010 maybe. So as you can see, in 1955, agriculture was 22%. In 65, it was reduced to 11%, 10.8%. You see it, don't you, here? Yes, you see it, 10.8%. And in 1970, again, the same, 10%. Manufacturing was 24%. It didn't change, 24, 25, 24, in these from 1955 to 1970. Now, what was increased mostly, for example, in trade, there was an increase from 10.7 to 14.6 in trade. In transportation, from 5.8 to 6.8. Services. Now, the most of the increase is in the services. In 1955, it was 18% here, as you see. It went up to 21.7% in 1965 and 32.9% in 1970. You see, before industrializing, services sector started expanding in this middle-sized city, whereas in the Western development, manufacturing and industrial establishments increased first to 35-40%, and then it declined, as you were exposed, and next year you will be exposed more, to these theories, where especially in post-industrial or post-modern period, how knowledge sector, information economy, information and communication, after information communication revolution. Of course, at that time there were no information communication revolution, but there were developments in that direction. Okay, now next, let me compare. Let me go to page 82 very quickly and compare class and how I define classes, how it changed in these 3 years again. Now you will see it here. It is here now. Okay, let me see. No, not yet. Table 7. Table 7, okay, here. Table 6 and table 7. Okay, now in this table 7 is a comparison of classes in my sample, the class position of the family heads in 1950 and now, in which direction it is changing. Now, in 1950, again, they were wage earners, they were memur, salaried, and they were esnaf and zanatkar, or owners of their workplaces, and not employed, of course, in 1950, depending on their age. Now, let's start with the salaried. Salaried was 90% of them are salaried now, and they were salaried in 1950. Only 6.7% of them were propertied, and it changed to the salaried. Okay, from salaried to propertied, it changed, and from salaried to wage earners, only 3%. Only 3%. Now, wage earners, again, wage earners are also wage earners in 1973, 74, as they were in 1950. But of these wage earners, 31%, now, some of the wage earners became propertied. They became esnaf and zanatkar. They were wage earner in 1950, and then they became esnaf and zanatkar in 1974. Some of the wage earners became salaried, but most of them, 55%, 54.9%, remained as wage earners. But if we think of property, that is esnaf and zanatkar in general, they are now 75% are propertied, and they were propertied at that time too. But some of the propertied in 1950 became salaried. They became memur, in the state or in the municipality, and some propertied became wage earners. You see, in both ways, some wage earners became propertied, esnaf zanatkar, some esnaf zanatkar became wage earners. A kind of upward and downward mobility, if you think of them in terms of positions, but in terms of the income, what are the differences between them, we can argue about that. Now, I will go to now table 9, where I will show you the relative standing of the Orta Kent. Now, Orta Kent here in this table 9, there are some chosen provinces. The first one is Orta Kent, Istanbul, Ankara, Izmir, and Samsun. There are others too. For example, Kayseri, next one. Now, if we see it in terms of urbanization, now percent urban, which means percent urban, 20,000 and above population. Now, Orta Kent is 23.9% urban. The rest are rural. Istanbul, 73%, Ankara, 72%, Izmir, 52.8%, Samsun, 28.7%, and Kayseri, next one, for example, more urban than Samsun, and close to Izmir, 39.6%, almost 40%. Kayseri is one of the industrializing, urbanizing provinces at that time as well. Now, I look at the literacy, how Orta Kent is something like 45, whereas others are, more literacy is over more. But now let's look at the employees. Employees are all those who are working in a workplace owned by state or privately. So employees of that type is only 12% in Orta Kent, whereas 71% in Istanbul, 54% in Ankara, 48%, and Samsun, for example, just 14%, just above Orta Kent, and Kayseri again, 33%. Also, I made indexes. I developed indexes. The average is, if the average is 100 here, you see the index value is below average. Orta Kent is below average, whereas Istanbul, Ankara, Izmir above average. Samsun is also below average. Kayseri is above average. Even Amasya is above average in terms of employees, state or private workplace. Now, if continuing of this same table, now industrialization. In terms of industrialization, Orta Kent is 3.9% manufacture. 3.9% of working population is employed in manufacture, whereas in Istanbul it is 28%, in Ankara 10%, in Kayseri 15%. No, in Samsun and 5.4% Samsun and 14% in Kayseri. Again, Kayseri comes out as industrialized. Now let me see. Orta Kent, Istanbul, Ankara, Izmir, Samsun, Kayseri. True. Okay. Correct. Now, in terms of rent. Now, rent turned out to be one of the crucial variables in this research. And at a national level, I was able to find rent. If people are living in a rented house, in the survey, in the census, what is the rent of your house? You know, that question was being asked, and on that basis, I found out that percentage of people living in high rent area, 400 Turkish lira and above, 400 at that time. You see, it was the rent of a house was average was 400 and above, 8% in Çorum, 42% in Istanbul, 37% in Ankara, Izmir, again, Samsun, in Kayseri, as you can see. And in terms of index, Çorum is below, and all others are above. For example, Kayseri is 120, where the average, if the average is 100%. And then there is also Republican People's Party Index. In Çorum, the percentage was 30.7, and the national average was 30.7. So in terms of Republican People's Party votes, Çorum, or my Orta Kent, is in the average, in the center, in the middle. But in terms of National Salvation Party, of Saadet Partisi and Justice and Development Party of today, these two parties was united at that time as National Salvation Party, and National Salvation Party got 21.7%, and in terms of index, it was above the average. So Çorum at that time was more National Salvation oriented or Islamist oriented in terms of the average of Turkey, whereas if we think of Republican People's Party as secularist, it was Çorum was average secularist and above average Islamist. Okay, now let me go now to one of the dependent variables, and then I will go to my results, my findings. Now the next one is now what is that image of cleavages. Let me go to that one. Maybe it is 100 occupation stratigraphic image. I think here it was table 10. What was this table? Stratigraphic image. I talk about this stratigraphic image already. Images of cleavage in okay, table 10. As you can see here, you know, we asked the question to the family heads: what are the different strata of people? You know, how do you conceptualize them? How do you categorize them? Into what kind of groups they are distributed? You know, are they all same or different? So 36% said that people in Orta Kent are rich, poor, and the middle. So rich, middle, and poor. More than 1/3 of the sample of the family heads said they are divided as rich, middle, and poor. At 14% said that they are professionally divided as merchants, craftsmen, small traders, bureaucrats, professionals, farmers, and workers. Really, this is a professional division. A 6% in the third category said that people in Orta Kent are Turks, Kurds, Circassians, and Gypsies. And then next, 5.8% said that they are Sunnis and Alevis. And then 5.6% said in terms of strata, low strata, medium strata, and high. And then 4.7% said that only 4.7% said that there is no differentiation. Everybody are in the same strata. You see, all these kinds of, for example, there was also educated and illiterate, good, bad, and normal, employer and employee, rightists and leftists, first class, second class, third class, you know, that kind of images there were in the minds of the people. Okay, then I recategorized these images, and then I cross-tabulated them with educational level. Okay, here I show you one of, you know, I have something 50 tables in this thesis. Now, one of them is images of cleavage or stratification by education of the family heads. Now, education of family heads is the column variable, 0 to 4, 5 to 7. So these are primary school graduates, and these are elementary school and over. And the images are divided, new conceptions that's coming from the center, you know, employers and workers, or professionals, workers, merchants, those kind of, or ethnic religious, in terms of ethnic religious and other type of conceptualizations. So as you can see, less than 4 years people, most of them, 43% of them has an image of, in terms of ethnic religious, and 31.5% as rich, poor, and middle, 24.8% new conceptions. Whereas 8 years and over, new conceptions increases from 24 to 42, and ethnic religious decreases from 43 to 23. As you see, there's a correlation between if there is an increase in education, there is a change from ethnic religious towards a new conception, and the relationship is measured with chi-square at 0.05 level. It is significant, and the strength of the relationship is measured with gamma coefficient, 0.23. Okay, I will not go into details. I had partial correlations and other types of correlations, but at the end, results. Now let me go to page 128. Okay. 128, and coming there. You see all these tables. Okay, this one. Correlates of modernity of attitude towards women. Okay, now highest correlation is 0.56 with rent. Now, as I told you, rent variable is from 0 to 339. Of course, there is no house with zero rent, but we asked everybody if they are living in their own house, what will be the rent of this house if you pay the rent, So it is 200, 300, whatever, up to 399, 1, and 400 and over, 2, 1 and 2, in terms of the table, in terms of the correlation. So gamma coefficient came out as 0.56. Now, in terms of literacy, still correlation is high. Literacy in the household, if there are in the household, if the percentage of people who are literate is between 0 and 74% and above, 75 and above, 1, 2, again, 1, 2. So as the literacy, so as the rent of the house gets increased, the attitude towards women becomes more modern. As literacy in the household increases, the attitude towards women is more equalitarian. Now, what does it mean, more modern? That women can work outside of home, that women can travel alone, that women can get higher education. What are the opposites of this? Traditional women's place is their home to raise their children and look after their children and husband, and no work outside of home. Second one, women cannot talk, cannot travel alone. There should be a chaperone, somebody accompanying her. Women should not be educated. Compulsory elementary education is enough for girls. After a certain age, they should stay at home. And women cannot talk with other men except her husband and family, male members in the family, but no other male member out in the work. I mean, anyway, they are not. So, so this is the modernity of women, is the opposite of these. Can work, can talk with other men, can travel alone. So woman is conceptualized as autarkic, as autonomous, relatively autonomous, of course, making her own decision. Okay, there was also a high correlation with education, as people's level of education went from 0 to 4 years to 8 years and over. The attitude towards women went from traditional to modern. Traditional, transitional, and modern. It was 1, 2, 3. Traditional, transitional, and modern. Secularism, there was measuring religiousness and secularism of the household heads, and there was a 0.46 level correlation. Class, if it goes from wage workers to propertied and to salaried, modernity, wage workers were less modern than esnaf and zanatkar, and less modern than salaried, or opposite. Salaried was more modern. The attitudes towards women of salaried was more modern, less propertied, and less wage workers. Although there was a not linear relationship, but a curvilinear relationship here with income. As income increased, modernity of attitude, consumption, newspaper reading, if religious newspaper reading, 1 to secular newspaper reading, media exposure, no media, or listening to radio only, but listening to radio plus newspapers are being read. So but the unexpected finding was anomie. We measured anomie, whether in the cities and in modern society, people can be trusted, whether people can come together and do work, and to what extent there is harmony in society, etc. The opposites of them was anomie. So as anomie increased, from low to high, modernity attitude to women decreased in the traditional direction. In terms of age, when going from young to old, again modernity increased. But another unexpected anomalous finding: the more living in the city, usually the more living in the city, the more modern. But in this city, in Ortaköy, it was the opposite. The more they were living in the city, the more traditional they were. You see, from 0 to 14 years to 15 to 52 years, and native of the Ortaköy, from birth to living. So as length of residence increased, attitude towards women went from traditional went from modern to traditional. So natives of Ortaköy were more traditional, whereas those migrants who newcomers from the villages or from other cities, they were more modern. Place of birth, usually in the village born and one, and town and city born two. Usually, if from village born to town and city born, modernity towards women, the attitude of modernity towards women, modern attitude increases, but it did not increase. This 0.09, and there's an A here. A means gamma and chi-square is not significant. No, chi-square. Chi-square is not significant at 0.05 level. So there is no relationship between place of birth and modernity of attitude towards women. This is really, this was an interesting finding. Now, before I go to the next level, because this was in 1974, this the result in 1974. And then there's a revisit in 1980-81, when there was events in Çorum, in this Orta Kent. And I found out what is the paradox here. There is a paradox in terms of age, length of residence, and place of birth. Why are they not related to modernity attitude towards modernity of women? And why they are not significant, but also the opposite. Why rent of the house is where is the table again? I just lost it. Here it is. Here, okay. Why rent is the highest, 0.56, highest correlation. What is rent measuring? Rent of the house being rented or not being rented? I found out after 1980 event. But before, this is my thesis, but also I published a paper, a chapter from this. Let me send this away and then bring that book. Here it is. But let me first show. I will come back to 191. But before I come there, now let me go here. Okay. Now let me share this. Share the screen, and here it is, and then here. Now here's the book. Social change in villages, towns, and cities. Social change in villages, towns, and cities. Now, if I go down, there are chapters about rural transformation, and if we look at here the contents, first 4 chapters are about village. The second part of the book is about changes, developments in towns and cities in Turkey. And this 8th chapter here is about this Orta Kent, what happened in 1980, and then what did I found out about the anomalies, the paradoxes, why rent was related to modernity of women in the highest, and length of residence was negatively related. The more living in the city, the more traditional. More urban, more traditional, rather than more urban, more modern. Usually more urban, more modern. But here it was more urban, less modern. Okay, the negative correlation. Let me go and show this chapters, the table there. I'm coming already, almost there. Here it is. Okay, now this table 2 here, let me make it a little bigger. Unfortunately, let me see whether there are any non-Turkish, so you will understand. Okay, now the same table that I showed you from my thesis, but a second column is added, social cleavage conception of social cleavage. Also, I put here in the book, although there was also that in the thesis, but I showed you only this attitude towards women, column. As you can see, these are the reported correlation gamma coefficients. Table 2, continuing in the second page here. Okay, now let me show this. So you see, aylık kira düzeyi is the highest, 0.56, and in terms of certification image, 22, and then next one is consumption level, and then age, and it goes like that, not exactly in the same, you see, it is being divided during the photocopy. So you will read, you will go to the book and you will read it yourself. Let me send this away. And now what happened? In 1980, unfortunately, there were events in the city. You know, it was in July sometimes in 1980. As you know, in 1980, 12th of September, there was a coup d'etat. Now, this event was July, August, 2 months before the military intervention. On a Friday, there was this rumor that the Alevis did something to the mosque or to the wall of the mosque, and then people from the mosques were, you know, shouting, protesting, and then some among them started burning and killing some people, some Alevis, in some neighborhoods. Some 20 people were killed, many injured. Now, next day in the newspapers, all the neighborhoods of Orta Kent were, by the newspapers, Hürriyet, all others, were put, you know, which neighborhood is predominantly Sunni and predominantly Alevi. So I get, it's a new variable, Now I had all other variables. Now, what did I find out? I found out that those who were living in high-rent houses were Memurs and Alevis, and Alevis were migrants from the villages. They were living in the before modernization, urbanization, Alevis were mostly living in the villages. So the urban population were mostly Sunnis. So Sunnis had their own houses. So they are traditional houses, and the rent, if they paid rent, they didn't pay because it's their own house. So low rent. So low rent was a proxy variable for being Sunni, whereas high rent was a proxy variable for being Alevi and salaried, educated. Now, the Alevis, most of the Alevis who are recent migrants, so the less they live in the city, the more modern. Why? Because these Alevis migrated from the villages, and plus, they are Alevis, where women's status is different from the Sunnis. Plus, they were migrants in Germany, some of them, and came back. So they are exposed to other urban environments. So although I wasn't able, in United States, when you are doing a research, you ask about whether the family had, or whomever you are administering a questionnaire, whether the Catholic or Protestant or Orthodox or whatever the denomination, but in Turkey, asking about denomination, this membership in 1974 was unthinkable, was forbidden. So I couldn't ask it. But the 1980 events gave me the data, and with that data, I was able to solve the enigma, the secret of why rent had highest variable, while residence in the town, the length of residence is inversely negatively correlated. The less urban, the more modern. Instead of more modern, more urban, more modern, less urban, more, the opposite correlation. And also, so this was an interesting chapter in that book. It actually, many people found it interesting and gave references to it. Now, let me go to, now, is it